Hello everyone, a very warm welcome to all. So I hope you all are doing very well and your studies are going super fine. So what we are going to discuss today, a very interesting topic, that is what we have learned so far in chemistry, what we have learned so far in organic, inorganic and physical. That whole actually plays what kind of a role in our lives. So we have discussed a slight related topic to our general lives, to our living systems, that was the biomolecules. But what about the actual application of all of these chemicals, what we have made so far? What is the application of these chemicals in our real lives? So that is the biggest question. And if you see, anything that is around you is a chemical. So chemistry actually surrounds us. We are revolving, or the chemistry is revolving around us. So vice versa. So basically each and everything that is involved in your lives is nothing but a chemical. So basically the food you eat is nothing but chemicals. You might be reminded of what we have done in the carbohydrates and proteins. What are these things? These are nothing but the chemicals. We have discussed the structural formula for each of the chemical. So these are nothing but included in chemistry. Again, the chemicals around us, the food we eat, the clothes we wear. In fact, the clothes that you are wearing right now, they are nothing but chemicals. The fibers, they are nothing but carbohydrates, and the dyes which are used to actually dye different colors for your clothes, or in fact dyes which are, or inks that you are using whenever you are writing with a pen. The pencil that you have, that is nothing but graphite. So each and everything, including the wood that is contained within the pencil, so that is also what? A chemical. So everything is a chemical. Now we will be discussing in this chapter is a detailed version of these chemicals, a detailed version of all the type of medicines, the class of medicines which we use for different purposes, different problems, different diseases which are occurring in our bodies. So basically what not is included in the chemistry, that is the question. So basically each and everything that is surrounding us, each and everything that is in this universe, even if you say rocks is nothing but, again, inorganic chemistry comes into play. So that is actually the beauty of chemistry. Chemistry is everywhere. So there is nothing with which you actually avoid chemistry. You cannot avoid chemistry anyhow, not even your exams and not even your real lives. So that is what chemistry is, and now we are going to discuss the chapter which is chemistry in everyday life. That means how chemicals are playing a very important role within our lives on daily basis. So what kind of chemicals are used? So we will be focusing upon the medicines, we will be focusing upon the cleansing agents, the soap that we use while bathing every day, actually all the clothes that we wear every day. So what kind of material is it, and what are the food that we have actually associated with the chemicals, the food preservatives which are added, the food adulterants that we add into our foods in order to actually enhance their quality or maybe degrade their quality. It is both the way around. So basically we will be focusing on these kind of topics in this chapter. Very interesting chapter. You will be having most of the theoretical part, but still it is very interesting. The action of these kind of chemicals in our daily lives is of utmost importance. So let's pay attention and start with the chemistry in everyday life. So basically what is actually medicines? The question is, what is medicine? So first of all, we would like to discuss the kinds of medicines used. So first we will be focusing on the medicines. What are medicines? So actually the chemicals that are used to treat a problem within our bodies. So that is nothing but actually given a class known as medicines. Medicines are nothing but the chemicals which are synthesized or maybe naturally occurring. You may be having so much of home remedies to treat an ongoing disease, to treat a problem which is occurring in your body. So there may be natural remedies, there may be chemical or man-made remedies. Both of them are actually including nothing but the chemicals. So here we would be discussing about the man-made ones. So under the category of medicines, medicines is what basically? I've got a definition for that. The chemicals which are used to treat a disease or a problem occurring in a living being. Why I am saying a living being? Because plants can also have diseases. Certain kind of diseases can occur in the plants as well. So those are also treated. In fact, there is the attack of so many insects on the plants. So to avoid that attack, we have again the medicines for plants. You can have fertilizers, chemical fertilizers, which can be a possible solution to it. So basically what we call a medicine is not actually what we have, what the doctor prescribes us, but it can be any kind of remedy which actually has a solution to the problem. So basically the medicines are chemicals, or I can say a remedy to our diseases. So it's a remedy to the problems. So if you are going to find out the solution to your problem, chemistry is the solution. So basically medicines are nothing but certain chemicals which are involved, which are treating the underlying condition in our body in order to have a proper positive effect, and we are again healthy and wealthy. So the next point I would like to discuss over here is, what is the term chemotherapy? So what is chemotherapy? You might have heard this term very well and many times. So basically chemotherapy is not just associated with treatment of cancer, but actually chemotherapy is a general kind of a word. Chemo means chemical, therapy means you have got a therapeutic use of that chemical. That means you are treating or you are soothing something. That means you are, if therapy is nothing but, if you go for a therapy of pain relieving, they maybe give you a massage. So actually therapy is something which soothes you out, which actually treats your problem. So that is nothing but the dictionary meaning of therapy. So chemotherapy is actually chemical, word chemical is used, plus therapy means therapeutic use. So that is therapeutic use. That is actually has resulted in a general term which is known as chemotherapy. We usually use this term whenever we are going for a treatment of cancer. So basically chemotherapy is used in that purpose, but you can have chemotherapy word used anywhere. If your medicine is treating you, your medicine has a therapeutic use, it is actually providing a kind of therapy to you, that means it is treating your condition. That means it can be said that the medicine is actually chemotherapeutic in nature, or I am going for a chemotherapy. So I hope that term is very well clear to you, not just in the terms of cancer, but it can be used for any medicine, whichever you like, which is, just mind it, which is actually having a therapeutic use. So I hope that is very well clear to you, a very general idea about what actually the medicines are. So basically medicines are providing nothing but the therapeutic use. So they are of therapeutic importance. hope that is very well clear to you. Now let's move on to the classification of what? Now we are going to discuss the class which is known as drugs. So we'll be discussing about the drugs here in this chapter, actually associated with the medicines. So what is a drug? That is the question. So here the question is, what is a drug? So basically, what is a drug? Drug can be having negative impacts, it can be having a positive impact. So whenever drug is nothing but a chemical, it can be naturally occurring, it can be a man-made one. So this is nothing but a chemical. So basically, whenever it is having a side effect, or if it is actually behaving as a stimulant, that is neurological stimulant, it stimulates your brain activity. That means it could be a negative kind of a drug, or it could be just like if you say, I am taking off the example of marijuana. So actually marijuana is what? It is a chemical which is obtained from the poppy plant, poppy seeds. So basically what is happening? That is also a chemical. Again, why we call it as a drug? And it is also having adverse effects, so many adverse effects. That means it is actually stimulating our brains, it is actually resulting in so many kinds of cardiovascular disease as well. So basically these are the drugs which are actually compelling a human being to do certain unwanted things. So those kind of drugs, those kind of chemicals having a negative impact on you, those are actually not included in the category of medicines, but those drugs which are actually having a positive effect, which is actually treating your condition, treating your disease, are actually under the category of medicines. So drug can be a medicine. Drug is known as a medicine when it functions in order to treat a disease. Treat a disease. So that is nothing but known as a drug. So drug is nothing but a chemical, and why we call it as a drug? Because it has a specific class of chemicals. It actions in a certain way. What kind of an action, what kind of an interaction does actually a drug has? We will be discussing this also. So first pay attention upon the definition. I hope that is very well clear to you. And now let's move on to the type of drugs we have. The classification, the basic classification of drugs, or you can say in the terms of medicines I am talking about, having a positive effect on our body. So here we have the various classification of drugs. So the classification of drugs can be on the basis of 4 types. So those 4 types I'll be writing it down. So just write down with me simultaneously. Classification of drugs can be on the basis of number 1 is pharmacological effects. So it is, first of all, let me just write that again. Pharmacological effects. So I am writing the points one by one and just try to have an idea about what kind of a classification will that be. Then I'll be discussing it as well. So here first is depending upon the type of pharmacological effects it display. What is pharma? Nothing but I'm talking about the medicinal field. So this is medicinal effects, if you say. Next is the action of drug, the drug action, or I can say how does it actually acts. Drug action, the type of action it displays, what is the particular kind of a disease which it can treat. So that is the particular action for a drug. The third one is on the basis of the chemical structure of the drug. Since we are discussing this in detail under the organic chemistry, under the chemistry, so we will be discussing the structures as well. Slight complicated, but you will get to know soon. So on the basis of chemical structures, I have got different kinds of drugs. And lastly, on the basis of the molecular targets, the targets on which the drug actually acts. So there are certain kind of targets for each and every particular drug. So that kind of a target I am talking about. So just try to think upon some of the examples in each of these cases, then I will be discussing it. So number 4th I am writing on the basis of molecular targets. So let's discuss these one by one. I hope you all have now got an idea about the examples that we can have in each of these cases. So first one is pretty easy. First is the pharmacological effects that we can have. So on the basis of pharmacological effect or medicinal effect. So on this very basis, what can we have? So actually there is particular class of each and every drug. That means some of the classes can treat certain diseases, some of the classes can treat another kind of diseases. So such classes, that means depending upon the type of effect, depending upon the type of work they actually do. So here, depending upon the type of medicinal effect, that means this kind of a classification is useful for the doctors. Why? Because they will be knowing that what particular kind of medicines will be treating such disease, so they can assign it to the patients very comfortably. So that is the actual class, that is the actual knowledge which doctors retain in their minds every time in order to have a proper perfect medicine for a perfect disease. So basically this kind of is helpful for doctors. The reason I have told you why. Now the last one is, we will be discussing the examples. So a very common example is of the painkillers. So painkillers in the pharmacological terms, what do I call painkillers? As analgesics. So there is a class of particular medicines which is actually known as painkillers. So examples include analgesics, so these analgesics are nothing but a class of painkillers. So it's specific class of painkillers. So if I know the pharmacological effect of some of the medicines, I may be categorizing them into the category of analgesics. So if I say that I have got a medicine red in color, so if I know the name for that medicine, if I know the structure, chemical structure for that medicine, I may be classifying it into analgesic. I say that this is a painkiller. I can assign that painkiller if I am a doctor. So I can assign that painkiller to my patient in order to have a proper effect, in order to minimize the pain. So what painkillers do? It diminishes the pain. So that is what is included here. Next is a very common example. I hope you must have thought about it. That is antiseptic. Another is antiseptic. Now what is antiseptic? Very easy. Actually, it kills the microorganisms. The microorganisms, the bacterias, what all, if they are actually producing an infection in our body. So what does antiseptic do? It actually cures that condition, it kills the microorganism, or it can arrest their growth. If there is a possibility that the microorganisms are likely to grow more and more, it arrest means it stops the growth of the microorganism further in order to reduce or stop the infection which is going on. So basically antiseptics are, they kill the microorganisms or what? They stop their growth So that is a very basic classification. I hope you all have got this. Now let's move on to another kind of classification which we have discussed is the drug action, the type of drug. Just be very sure that we are over here discussing about the drugs, the kind of medicines that we use. So here another kind of classification for drugs is the action, is their action. So here what do I have? I have got the drug action. Second is on the basis of drug action. So basically the kind of work a particular drug will play. So it is based on kind of work, or I can say the pharmacological activity. Quite a technical term, but very simple. Pharmacological activity, that means what kind of an activity that drug is showing. So actually the kind of work or pharmacological activity is governed under this very classification. So if I've got a particular action of a drug, that means it is behaving in such a manner, it has got such a mechanism within the chemical process. So I'll be classifying that drug under the category of drug action. For that you have got an example. That example is of histamines. So you know there is an enzyme called histamine which is released in our body against any kind of an infection. That means if I'm trying to breathe, and sometimes what happens is the the dust particles, they come up into our nasal area or the nasal tract. Then what happens is, in order to have a counteract, in order to have a reaction of the body, in order to eliminate all those stuff out, all those dust particles out, what our body does is they release certain kind of chemicals. Those chemicals are known as histamines. So what do is they actually contract our nasal passage in order to stop the entry of those dust particles. So one starts coughing so much, one starts sneezing so much. That is nothing but the action of the body against the dust particles. So what does the body do is they release the chemicals, and then chemical will act against all those dust particles. So sometimes what happens is these kind of chemicals are over released within our body. That means sometimes every time a human being is coughing so much, or he or she is sneezing so much. So basically what is happening is there is over release of these chemical enzymes. So what happens is this will disrupt the normal activity of a human being, which causes a lot of problems. So there may be release of so much amount of histamines in our body. So in order to prevent that, we have got a solution for it. What kind of a solution? We have got a drug which are known as a class of drugs known as antihistamines. So we have got antihistamines. And what does these do? Antihistamines actually inhibit the production of histamines. So it, or I can say, inhibits the activity of histamines. If the histamines are actually acting in more than required amounts, so what happens? We can have an antihistamine and it will disrupt its process of the histamine process, maybe its action or maybe even its production. So that is how this class of drugs, that means antihistamines, is being used within the medicinal chemistry. So I hope that is very well clear. I hope I am able to make you clear with each and every classification. Now let's move on to the third classification. What we had over here is on the basis of the chemical structures. So certain class of drugs will be having a certain kind of, a special kind of structures involved, or I can say a common structure involved in all of those. Not all, but I am specifying a particular class. If I take up a particular class of drugs, particular class of medicinal drugs, so basically what they have is common in, they may be having a common chemical structure. So most prominently, so let me just write this first, on the basis of chemical structure. So here what we have, a common structure in a particular class of drugs. So a common chemical structure in a particular class of drugs resulting in what? Resulting in a similar kind of pharmacological activity. So here this very common thing of chemical structure between the drugs will be resulting in a similar kind of a mechanism, similar kind of an action of that drug. So it is results in a similar chemical activity, or I can say, to be very precise, pharmacological activity. Pharmacological activity. So I hope that is clear to you as well. So over here, what do I have is an example of sulfonamides. So I've got an example over here is a class of sulfonamides. So I've got class of sulfonamides having similar kind of chemical structures. What kind of a chemical structure? So just pay attention over here. So it is something like this. Sulfonamides appear like this. So that is the class of sulfonamides, and R can be any of the groups depending upon the type of drug. So I hope I am very well justifying you the topics over here. Now let's move on to the last, very last classification of the drugs is on the basis of the molecular targets. What all targets are assigned by the drugs? So drugs are nothing but some kind of warriors, and they have got the targets. They need to attack onto the targets. That is their prime function. So here on the basis of the molecular targets, so what do I have over here? So basically there are class of drugs, different class of drugs, which will, like I have got class A of drugs. So A would be attacking onto the carbohydrates, or I can say I've got a class B, it will be going to attack onto the some other class of compounds, let's just say lipids or proteins. So what is basically under this category included is certain kind of a particular kind of drugs having similar kind of a mechanism. mechanism action. So the drugs over here, drugs are having common molecular targets, to attack. Having what? Having similar kind of a mechanism of action. So they have similar kind of mechanism of action. So generally, or I can say naturally, they will be involved in some kind of a chemical process while acting. So that kind of a chemical process must be having a proper mechanism to it. Anything and everything included in the chemistry is having a proper mechanism. So all those mechanisms which are involved within the drugs, so some of them may be having a common target. That means I've got 3 drugs which can act as a painkiller. I've got 4 drugs which can act as an antiseptic. So that means I have got a lot many number of drugs which is particularly included in one class and can behave in a similar manner, can be having a proper prime target, a common prime target I can say. So that means they will be having a similar kind of mechanism. I am not saying it will be exact, but it will be going on in a similar kind of a direction. So that is how we are going to classify the drugs. I hope that is very well clear to you, because that is the basis of this chapter. So I hope that is clear to you. Just try to note this down, then I will be taking up actually the drug interaction. So I hope you all have noted this down. Let's move on to a very interesting kind of a, actually what kind of a mechanism is followed by drugs whenever they attack onto a target. So what is happening in our bodies, that is the only kind of mechanism which we are going to discuss. Now, let's move on to the topic of drug target interaction. How actually the drug is acting on its target. So they are warriors, they are fighters, they need one target as their prime target to attack. So how does they actually attack onto a target? That is the question. So basically what we have in our bodies is, we have got so many types of macromolecules. What kind of macromolecules have we discussed so far? In the biomolecules we have discussed carbohydrates, we have discussed proteins, we have discussed enzymes and whatnot. So basically what is happening is, drug is acting on to these very targets. So these are nothing but the targets which are assigned to the drugs, and drugs finally altering their activity will try to act in the body differently. So basically if there is some kind of a disease which is going on in the body, some kind of a deformity which is going on in the body within the macromolecules, within a biological process, so what drug does is, actually they can inhibit their action or even they can speed up their action depending upon the type of work they have assigned. So in that manner they are acting. So let us just see how. Over here we will be discussing about the drug, how the drug is actually acting on an enzyme and how the drug is actually acting on the receptors that we have. So for that purpose, let us just first discuss what enzyme is and what receptors are. So here we are discussing about the biomolecules, the macromolecules we are discussing. So these are nothing but the macromolecules. So basically what is enzyme? What is receptors? Enzymes we all know, they are biological catalysts. So they are biological catalysts which actually makes the chemical processes in our body happen, and the lower the activation energy, we all know, the lower the, since catalysts are the ones who lower the activation energy for a chemical reaction, that is how our enzymes are working. So enzymes and receptors are nothing but, these two are nothing but the proteins, certain class of proteins they are. And what are the receptors? Receptors are actually the carriers for information. Receptors, or I can say receivers, what you have got in, what are mobile phones? Mobile phones are nothing but the receivers of the signals. So those only are the receptors which are acting in our body. So we have got so many nerve impulses, we have got so many information to be transferred from one part of the body to the another. So basically what is happening? Who all are sitting out there and receiving those signals in our body? Those signals are received by not the mobile phones, definitely, but the receptors in our body. So basically receptors are nothing but receivers. And what does receiver do? They actually collect the information. So they collect the information, or I can say the signals, to be very precise, the nerve impulses that we have got inside our body. So the nerve impulses, and what does receptors do? Receptor, they reach out that information, they pass on that information to the main cell. So they pass the information to the cell, So basically that is the work for these two. And what else do I have here? Yes, we have discussed receptors, nothing but the receivers, they collect information and they are actually serving as a communication. So here I would like to mention it. They are serving as communication, serving as communicators, I can say. So who can imagine, if we do not have receptors in our body, I cannot feel heat, I cannot feel itching, I cannot blink my eyes. So basically what receptors does is, they actually transmit the information within our body that there is an itching within an area, so I need to scratch it down, or there is some kind of a heat which has been received onto the body, I need to just remove my hand from that object. So basically these all informations, these all instant informations are passed on within the body. And who are the receivers? The receivers are nothing but the receptors within our body which do this kind of work, and they transmit the information to the main cell. So that is what are enzymes and receptors. This is the basic mechanism, this is the basic action of these two kinds of macromolecules which are within our bodies, within the class of proteins that we discuss. So what we have started off with today is, actually chemistry is how linked on to our daily basis in our real lives. So chemistry plays a very important role. So basically what we are discussing is the application. How do we apply all these logical concepts, all these mechanisms that we have studied so far into our real lives? So there is definitely an application, and in everything, each and everything, you will find chemistry around you. So in this next session, I'll be discussing what? I will be discussing about, we have covered what enzymes and receptors are, and now I'll be discussing how the drugs actually act on to these enzymes, act on to these receptors whenever there is some kind of a problem which is happening in our body. How does drug choose its target and how does it acts? So you need to revise what we have done so far, as I tell you every time. So just keep on revising, just keep on practice, and till then, have a good day.